Thank you very much. And I'm just delighted to be here in Poland. This is my first trip to Poland, and it's a real pleasure for me to be able to present the results of our 2009 Index of Economic Freedom. This is the 15th year that we have been producing the Index of Economic Freedom. And that's important, I think, for one fact particularly, and that is that we have a 15-year database. We've been collecting statistics from around the world now for 15 years. We've been collating them, we've been using them ourselves for analytical purposes, but now we've put them online, and that database is publicly available to anyone, anywhere in the world for your own use in your research. The data is very sound data. We collect from recognized international organizations. Most of our data comes from either the World Bank or the International Monetary Fund, the OECD, other international organizations. We use ILO data in part for our labor freedom indicator. We use some data from recognized non-governmental organizations like Transparency International. So the database is really quite strong, and I would say one of the basic strengths of our operation. What's new this year in the index is that primarily that we've added 21 new countries to the index, so we now cover 183 countries around the world. It's by far the most comprehensive index of its type, and we're very proud of the fact that we were able to collect data in all of these countries around the world. We have a couple of, in addition to the rankings, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, but we have some analytical essays because we try to show why economic freedom matters. And the first essay on the list here, 15 Years of Advancing Freedom, really uses the entire 15-year database, and we've done longitudinal studies over that time of some various factors related to economic freedom and economic progress. And I would say that this is particularly important from Poland's point of view, because in fact Poland is one of the top gainers of economic freedom over the entire life of our index. It's certainly in the top 25 of countries that have gained freedom, economic freedom, over the last 15 years. You've surpassed about 30% of the other countries in the world in terms of economic freedom in that time. And you're now in the top half of countries in terms of economic freedom. I think that's a very important record of success and progress. And of course, you've had excellent economic growth rates as well, averaging some 4.5% over the last 10 years. So that's a very important record of progress that gives the context for everything else we're going to talk about today. Our index is a composite view of economic freedom. We measure and rank every country in 10 separate areas. Then we average those scores in each of the 10 areas to get a composite ranking and score for economic freedom. And I want to just describe them very briefly. Business freedom measures how easy it is to start a business, but also, and very important in these times, how easy it is to wind up a business. Are there good bankruptcy rules in place that can help restructure businesses that are starting to fail and use those assets for more productive purposes? So we measure both sides of that. We use primarily World Bank data for that indicator. Trade freedom is a measure of both tariff rates, and of course all the countries of the European Union have common tariff rates, 2.1% on average, weighted average tariffs in the European Union. But we also look at non-tariff barriers, and that's where most of the protectionism occurs these days in countries around the world. Of course, in the current crisis, we're seeing calls in some countries, including my own, for greater protectionism. And I hope that we can all find a way politically to resist those calls for protectionism, because as we will see, increases in trade freedom have been largely responsible for overall increases in economic freedom and prosperity over the last 2 decades. Fiscal freedom is a measure of taxation. We look both at marginal tax rates. Of course, the most important tax rate from the point of view of economic growth is the corporate marginal income tax rate. We've seen countries in Europe particularly, and Eastern Europe in particular, make significant cuts in their corporate tax rates, and they're showing impressive economic performance. The attractiveness of the countries, particularly Eastern Europe, for investment from around the world has been increasing rapidly. Government size is a measurement of government expenditures. We look at the percentage of income in a country that is used or commanded by the government. And the countries of Europe don't do so well on this indicator because many of you have very high levels of government size relative to the overall economy. Monetary freedoms primarily a look at inflation, but we also look at price controls in a country. Investment freedom is one of our hardest indicators to gather data on. There aren't good data sources worldwide for investment freedom, but we do manage to gather from a lot of private sector databases. We look at national databases on rules and regulations. In individual countries, we compile those together and see how easy it is for a business, either foreign or domestic, to make a new investment. Financial freedom looks at competition in the banking sector. Again, very difficult to get worldwide data in this area. We use our own experts at the Heritage Foundation in this particular indicator. And we look at the rules, we look at the number of banks, we look at government ownership of banks, a variety of factors like that, and come up with a measurement. Property rights. This is probably the foundation, the most fundamental indicator of any that we measure. And we see certainly in developing countries very poor protection of property rights. We're looking not just at the protection of private property, but we're also looking overall at the rule of law. How easy is it to access the court system? Is there corruption in the court system? Is the court system transparent? How rapidly are cases decided? There are instances where it can take years, literally, for the courts to adjudicate a given case. And we find that the developing countries and the poorer countries do very poorly indeed on this indicator. Most of the European countries do very well. A typical score would be 90 for a European country, certainly 80 or 90. We'll see Poland's score in a minute, and that might be something to talk about. Freedom from corruption is a pretty straightforward idea. It's important to understand that we're measuring perceptions of corruption. So it's not my opinion of the level of corruption in Poland or my experts at the Heritage Foundation. What we're measuring is a survey in this case of the perception of the Polish people themselves of the level of corruption, and also people who might want to invest, potential investors in Poland. So it's a measurement of the perception of corruption.